Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Girls Who Eat, Breathe, and Dream Motorsport. I'm Jamie, I'm your host, and my guest for today is Tom Brooks. Welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to having a chat and talking about all things related to motorsport, I guess.
Yes, let's start briefly with the news of F1. Ocon leaving Alpine at the end of the 2024 season. What are your thoughts about that?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, obviously Ocon has had some really good times with Alpine, his first victory in Hungary a few years ago. And it seemed like he was pretty well established there, and then to go from that to not having a drive at the moment for the 2025 season certainly caught me by surprise, but he has had a few run-in with teammates over the years. I remember, him and Sergio Perez when he was at Force India and Racing Point and so on, and even when he was with Fernando at Alpine as well. They had a bit of history going on there, so I think that obviously it's a decision that's not been made lightly, and I highly doubt that it's just as a result of what's happened at Monaco for Esteban, and it's a shame for him because I have actually met him and worked with him when I did a Gran Turismo event a couple of years ago in Monaco, and he was just the nicest guy. But obviously, it's very different being a nice guy and when you're on circuit and how your conduct is there. So clearly, Alpine have made a decision that they think is going to be beneficial for them. What do I think about it? I think it's a shame, but I get that it's a business at the end of the day, and they're a team that in the hopefully not too distant future could be back fighting for top tens, hopefully podiums, and in theory victories. That's where they want to be going. What you want is two drivers that are going to be able to perform to the best of their ability and not be running into one another. You can't take that risk. So from a operational managerial team perspective, I get it. But from Esteban's point of view, I think it's a big shame because he's a big talent, and I hope that he's able to land on his feet somewhere else. And I hope that he's also able to learn from the mistakes that, in theory, that we all believe have cost him his drive for the 2025 season.
Yeah, I hope we land somewhere because it would be a shame. And also, when I sometimes I talk with my parents about Formula One, there's no guarantee that if someone as a rookie is coming in, he's going to do better. So I'm always curious if who they are going to put in that seat. Like, if are they going to get like Mick or someone or a rookie? That's always, I think it's very hard because, like, also with Williams and Logan, I always think, like, Logan it's his second year, and
Mhm.
there is no guarantee if you, for example, would put Antonelli in that seat, there is no guarantee he would do something great. So I always think, okay, I get it, but also please don't ruin someone's career.
Yeah, sure. No, I get it completely. And obviously, there is a risk putting a rookie in there. There are two ways it could go. You could end up with the Logan Sargent syndrome, where you have a string of poor results and don't really perform to the potential that he's had in other formulae, or you could have the Lewis Hamilton Max Verstappen effect, where they chuck a rookie into a seat and immediately they stand out. So it's always a risk, isn't it, going and doing something like that? And you don't generally see that from top teams nowadays. Even when Verstappen came in, he was at Toro Rosso and had to sort of learn his craft for a couple of years and then was parachuted into Red Bull at the expense of Kvyat. So I think that if they do go down the route of sticking a rookie in a seat like an Alpine, I don't think it'll do them any harm because let's face it, they can't really do much worse than they have been over the course
Mm.
of this year from a performance perspective. But at the same time, do they need another driver in the other seat that's a steady pair of hands that can kind of steady that ship and weather the storm for them at the moment where they're going through these difficulties? Because if you go and stick a rookie in that seat, they don't have the relevant experience. So it is definitely going to be a risk. And like you say with Sargent as well, he's obviously been underperforming. Do you stick Antonelli in that seat, or do you stick another driver who can again hopefully do the same thing as what Albon is doing and bring them to the front? But I think there's going to be a big shake-up for F1 in 2025. And yeah, over the course of the summer break, there's going to be, I think, a fair few wild rumors flying around than there have been already, to be honest.
Yes, because we were talking with the team, we were talking about, I was like, the moment Lewis went to Ferrari, my whole schedule of who was going where, I was like, I don't, everything can happen now. So I believe
It
everything.
created the domino effect, didn't it? I think that's the thing. It's a case of Hamilton's done this, then the pieces are going to fall into place. There were rumors about would Alonso go to Mercedes. He's now signed for Aston Martin for long term. I imagine he's going to be part of their World Endurance Championship plans at some point in the future as well. So that's decided. You know, Verstappen staying at Red Bull in theory as well, and so there's lots of things that have still yet to be decided. But I think it'll be exciting, you know, and Formula One needs a bit of a shake up as well. Let's be fair, the on track products this year hasn't been particularly that exciting, save for, you know, a couple of standout moments. But, you know, when you've got movements in the driver market and there's unpredictability, that's what everyone tunes into motorsport for. We tune into it because we don't know what's going to happen at the end. When you can kind of predict that the same driver is going to be winning a race weekend after weekend, it does get a little fatiguing. So when you have those changes like Hamilton going to Ferrari, possibly, you know, some other changes, a rookie coming into Alpine, or you know, maybe Antonelli going into Williams, or possibly even Mercedes, who knows at this point. So those are the things that make it exciting, and those are the things that are going to make me want to tune in for next year.
Yeah, true. Because always with Formula E, there is always silly season. It doesn't matter if it's last year or the year before, there's always changes. But with F1, it's last year didn't change anything. So I'm curious how the whole chair dancing is going to happen and how it's going to play out for next year.
Sure.
But I know who you are and what you do in motorsport. But some of my listeners who might not know you, who you are and what you're doing in motorsport.
Well, my name is Tom Brooks. I am the TV commentator for the Formula E World Championship.
Yes. I know that the funniest thing is that last year I was watching with Siggo because I'm Dutch and he had like the Dutch commentary. And I was like, I'm going to listen to the English one because as I told Sanders last week, the Dutch one is not the best. So I was like, okay, I want to change something up. So I'm now listening to English commentary, which is very nice. I really love what you're doing. And
Thank you.
Very good at what you're doing.
I really appreciate that. It's a funny old thing, commentary, and it's so subjective, you know, and I have to always remind myself of that whenever I'm commentating, because especially in the modern world in which we live, everyone has an opinion, and a lot of people project that opinion without thought of the consequences of that. And for every person that likes me, there could be another person that doesn't like me. And that's just the way that commentary is. You're not going to be able to please all the people all the time. So I'm really grateful that you like it. So thank you very much for that. You know, I really try my hardest in everything that I do. I love commentating on motorsport. I love Formula E in particular. I've really enjoyed sort of adapting to that over the last, what is it now, 9-10 months? Hang on, what are we in June? It's almost been a year since I did my first Formula E commentary. So it's been a joy and continues to be so.
Good. And how did you come to that place? Where did you start? What did you do beforehand?
I've done quite a few things in motorsport, really. So my career within media actually began when I was 13. So I'm 27 now, just for reference. And I started doing radio at my high school, essentially. So there was a radio station that was there. It was a fully funded community station. And I just wandered in one day because I was a bored teenager, had long hair, played the guitar, didn't really fit in anywhere, and was just sort of looking for something to do, really, and thought it could be quite good fun. So I wandered in there and decided to see if there'd be an opportunity. And I was quite lucky that my voice dropped when I was quite young. So obviously on the radio, it doesn't really matter what you look like. You can sound older and it kind of works. So I sort of got trained up over a period of a few months and eventually did my first show and then did another. And I ended up staying at the radio station there for the best part of 7 years, all told, volunteering throughout my time at secondary school. I left when I was just turning 20 because I moved out to Spain for a job. But somewhat about halfway through that, when I was about 16, 17, I was thinking about where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with my life. And my mum works in a school. My dad is a mechanic. And I would constantly hear them coming home and moaning about their jobs and, you know, this is terrible and that's terrible. And, you know, I just sort of realized that I didn't want to have a job that I wasn't keen on, that I wanted something that got me out of bed every day. And I thought, well, I'm 16, I'm young enough. If I can find a path that works for me, then that's fantastic. So essentially, I just decided I was going to become a motorsport commentator. So I went into the radio station one day, into the second studio, which never really got used aside from recording stuff. And I found an old video of Michael Schumacher doing a pole lap at Catalonia, and I whacked the microphone up, hit record, and I recorded some commentary over it. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go and see what's what. So I did the commentary, stuck it on my Facebook page, And my friends seemed to like it, and I thought, okay, well, I'll do another, and I'll do another, and eventually, I sort of built up a sort of repertoire of about 5 or 6 different videos. So then, what I decided to do to take it a bit more seriously was collate them into a DVD and make a show reel. And I made sort of, I don't know, 10, 12 copies of these DVDs, put them in a case with a cover on and everything like that. So I then decided to go to the Autosport show, which is a big motorsport show that happens at the start of the year, because I knew that that was a place where networking would be really important. And the thing I've figured out really early on is that the industry is about who you know. So I decided that I'd go to the Autosport show, hand out these DVD show reels, and then basically decide, sort of wait to get feedback on them, essentially. And if I got some feedback, if I met some people, if I got a couple of phone numbers, it wasn't a wasted trip. So I went there, did it, and only heard back from one commentator actually, which was David Croft, who of course commentates on Sky F1 and has done for 12 years now, and has did Five Live before that, and he was the only guy to get back to me, which I really really appreciated, especially because he was well entrenched with Sky Sports at the time and Formula One and so on. So I was very grateful for that, and just decided that that was the path I wanted to go down. So just met people, networked, got opportunities over the next sort of few years. As I said, moved out to Spain when I was 19, worked in MotoGP and World Superbikes for a couple of years, doing commentary and voiceovers and so on. Moved back at the end of 2019, so I was just about to turn 22, to work for Gran Turismo full time, which I still do to this day, and do some freelance stuff on the side. So I do Gran Turismo, I did some Rallycross, I now do some British Superbike stuff. I dropped the Rallycross at the end of last year because the Formula E gig came about, and that's what I do now, basically. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, and I'll get a proper job one day, but until then, I'm just going to try and enjoy it as much as I can.
I mean, it's kind of already a proper job if you do what you like, I feel like.
No, this is true. And I figure that if you do a job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I still have to pinch myself genuinely when I get into the commentary box, because I get in there and I'm doing something that I just enjoy doing. It's a passion for me. And I walk out after a weekend and I think, oh, I'm going to get paid for this. That's amazing. So, yeah, I'm very, very lucky to be able to do what I do. And I don't take it for granted.
It's because also like I had a pinch me moment in Monaco because it was my first media access this season. So I was in Monaco at the media launch in the morning and then the VIP launch in the evening. And it was like, oh my God, I'm here as like someone from the media, which is something I want to do. So to be actually having the chance to go to those events, it was like, oh my God, I did this by myself. Which also, like with the podcast, it's so important. I know for the people who listen a lot to the episodes, we tell this a lot, I say this a lot. Networking is so important because what you say is who you know, and not maybe also a bit what you know, but mostly who you know. And yeah, it still shocks me every time someone is coming back to me like, oh yes, I want to be a guest on the episode, like Saunders did, you did. We had Jeff on the podcast like in March. So it's for me, we did it, and now I'm doing this alone for like a year. So it's not even that long.
Mm-hmm.
And opportunities already had, like, also I will be in London and then I will be again with media, and it's for me it's still a pinch me moment because like I want to work in motorsport, I want to work in media, and then doing this with my own platform basically is still insane to me.
Well, congratulations. I mean, first of all, that's amazing what you're doing. And, it's really great that you've been able to create these opportunities for yourself because, like you say, it's who you know. It's these opportunities don't land in your lap. You have to go out there and you have to get them. And what you want to be is the person that is at the end of the phone, or is the person that somebody calls who's got an opportunity. Oh, could you come here and could you cover this for me? Could you do this or could you do that? And then opportunity could lead to something else because you've met another person at that job. I was very lucky with Formula E that the opportunity came about because I knew a producer that I'd met 5 years before when I did a Rallycross championship internationally, and essentially the production of it was not particularly brilliant. So Eurosport, where the gentleman worked at the time, sent out a producer, and I met him there, and we sort of kept in semi-regular contact over the years. And then he phoned me up midway through last year and said, "We'd need a commentator for Formula E. Would you be interested in coming doing Rome?" And that was how that worked about. So again, it's something that seemed quite innocuous at the time. Oh, I've met this guy and he's great. Didn't think it would lead to anything. Led to the biggest opportunity of my life. So you've just got to keep going and keep at it, and just enjoy it for whatever it is, you know?
Yes, I totally agree. You said you had done many already motorsport series. What is your favorite motorsport series to follow?
That's a really tricky one because I think in the motorsport series, all have different idiosyncrasies that are make them unique and make them brilliant. So, for example, I love Formula E because it's hard. It's a hard thing to follow. It's a hard thing to kind of get your head around. So when I do that, it really makes my brain work. And it's taken me probably, I would say, until Mazzano, where I got my head around how the style of racing is and how it works and working out different attack modes and so on. So I feel like I've kind of got my feet under the table with that now. I mean, I remember doing Rome and commentating on the races, and I felt a bit like a rabbit caught in the headlights. I was just like, oh, I can't read this race. And that's the ability you need as a commentator. It's not just to be able to describe what's happening, it's to kind of be able to predict what's happening next and to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of it so that you, well, sound like you know what you're talking about, basically. So yeah, Formula E is really, really good in that sense. And I love the challenge that it presents. And I also love the racing as well. What have we had 8 different winners over the course of this year, 4 drivers effectively in the championship fight going into the last 2 weekends of the season. You know, that's fantastic. On the other side of the coin, I also do British Superbike support classes. And I've done that for the last few years now. And I love it because it's bike racing, and bike racing is proper no holes barred wheel, you know, not wheel to wheel, but handlebar to handlebar action. There's not really much in terms of strategy that's involved in those races. So the lights go out, a race happens for 10 or 15 laps, riders go as fast as they can, try not to fall off, and they finish. And in theory, it should be a good close race. So I love that element to it as well. I love rallycross because it's fast and it's frenetic. I do a bit of racing myself, and I love how much of a challenge it is because it's all in the first 10 seconds of the race as to whether it's won or lost. If you make a bad start away from the lights, that can cost you a chance of victory, you know? So it's really hard for me to sit there and pick a particular favorite uh, type of motorsport, but I think all have got their own sort of unique quirks and beauties, really. And that's, I think, what keeps me engaged with motorsport. If everything was all the same, if you tuned into Formula One and it was the same as Formula E as it was the same for MotoGP or British Superbikes, it wouldn't be that exciting because you'd be like, oh, well, I could just watch this over here and, you know, it'd be the same thing. The fact that everything is different and no 2 races are ever going to be the same is what keeps us coming back.
Yes, but I was just thinking, the Rome was hectic last year. So, I mean, that was not very predictable. Definitely the big crash.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. Or I mean, it caught everybody off guard, least of all the drivers, really. You know, it's a frightening crash, that, and we're very lucky with modern safety standards how they are that we didn't have any injuries or anything serious along the lines of that, because all the drivers that were on the grid on the Saturday made it to the grid on the Sunday, which was quite remarkable, really. And it was a frightening crash, and it was one of those things where I was like, "Oh God, is this what Formula E is going to be like?" You know, I had a bit of a curse that was going on last year. I did 4 races in Formula E at the end of 2023, and 3 of them got red flagged. So I wondered if the common denominator was me that was causing those problems, to be honest with you. Thankfully, that rumor seems to have been quashed a little bit. But yeah, it was a pretty frenetic first weekend.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I was watching, I believe, with my parents, and it happened, and I was like, I hope they are working out fine because it was a big one, and also like it's like, oh my God, the engineers and the mechanics, and there's so much things to do before getting to tomorrow. It's still another race.
Yeah, it was like a
So
scene. It was like a scene from Scrap Heap Challenge down in the pit lane afterwards. You know, the cars just all completely destroyed, and they were begging, stealing, and borrowing parts from other teams. You know, so they were like not stealing tubs, but you know, borrowing tubs from other teams and front wings from this team, and you know, spares department were, you know, making phone calls late into the night, and it was a proper effort by the teams to make that happen. You know, breaking curfews to make sure that cars got out on the grid and other teams helping out other teams as well. I love that. And I love the sense of community within Formula E. That's something that you don't get in every series. You know, you can walk into any garage and you can have a conversation with pretty much anybody. And if you do see another team in trouble, they will help out other teams, which I love. There is a real sense of belonging and a real sort of happy atmosphere within the paddock, which I really like.
Yes, because also I think it's important because for the whole sport series in general that, you know, doesn't look good if like 4 drivers are missing because another team's like, I'm not going to help you. And definitely for Formula E because it's still like growing and it's still not that old. And like I walked in the paddock for the first time in Monaco and then last 4 weeks back in Berlin. I think it's 4 weeks, something like that. It's also just it feels like an ease. It doesn't, you don't feel hectic, you don't feel like stress or something. I think that's a good feeling for everybody who works there and also walks around. I think, yeah, it's always strange to say, but also it feels like coming home like to a family, like Guino and yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's how
No,
I felt.
it really is. And it's the same for people within the paddock as well, because obviously we generally all travel together. So, you know, I'll travel as part of the TV team. So we're all on the same flights and that sort of thing. So you've got your own little community there, but the teams will travel with other teams and so on. So it's quite regular that we'll all be on the same flights on the way home, especially if it's a long haul one. And if it's obviously a Jake Dennis flight, then you just make sure that you've not got anything on for the next 3 days because it's going to end up getting delayed. But yeah, it really is good fun. And I think that there is a real, like you say, sense of community within the paddock. And I really like that. It wasn't intimidating stepping into the paddock for the first time. And that was the big thing for me. They call Formula One the Piranha Club and have done for a long time because of the intimidation that you can feel walking into the paddock because there's a sense of status and grandeur about it. I can't speak for first-hand experience because I've not been in a Formula One paddock, but in Formula E, it's a very welcoming, very wonderful place. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, because I didn't know anyone beforehand. And in Monaco, I met people in Berlin. I met people like it's if I know them already for like a year or something like that. So I think that's what I love about the paddock. And also talking about Jake, I went to Monaco. I flew in on Wednesday morning. I had a delay. I was like, I know Jake is not on this flight, but a lot of people had Jake problems.
Yeah, channeling your inner Jake Dennis for that one.
Yes. And someone also said like, if you see him at your gate, you don't want to be on that flight.
It's true. Yeah, it's I've ended up on a couple of flights with him this year and they haven't been delayed. He had a good run at the start of the year, but I've seen on his Instagram stories over the last few days his luck seems to be running out a little bit. So I'm going to just make sure that my travel for the rest of the year doesn't coincide with his.
Yeah. But I also think that's because if you travel so much, at some point you will have some bad luck.
Luck of the draw, isn't it? I've been quite fortunate that my travel this year, touch wood, I'm going to say this now, it's going to be terrible for Portland and London's not so much of a bother, fortunately, but yeah, hopefully it's okay. But I've been very fortunate that this year it's generally been pretty good.
Yeah. You definitely sometimes interact with drivers. Is there a moment with a driver you've loved and can't talk about?
That's a good question. What can I talk about and what can't I talk about? Yeah, like I say, everyone in Formula E's been wonderful. I mean, from my first weekend when I commentated, I think my first session was with Kelvin van der Linde, who was reserve driver for Abt, but he was also doing TV for us that weekend in Rome. And then we had Sasha Fenestraz in the commentary box at one point that weekend. So that was really nice as well. In terms of interactions within the paddock, it's a bit of a weird one because obviously you're working a lot of the time. So you go there and you're all focused on the job and the drivers are focused on the job. Jake Hughes is a particular driver that I always generally try and make time for, and he always generally makes time for me as well, which is a really nice sort of dynamic. So I wandered up to him on the grid in Shanghai and asked him what his thoughts were on the race, what type of race he thought it was going to be. And he was very open about that, which from a commentary point of view really helps me out because it's just those last few little bits of information where you can go back to the box and say, right, I think that this is going to happen because I've spoken to this driver, and it just sort of puts a bit of, puts flesh on the bones, so to speak. So that really helps out. Other bits with other drivers, I'm just trying to think. There's nothing in particular that stands out. Tokyo, I ended up doing karaoke with Sasha Fenestraz after the race, which was good entertainment. That was in a bar quite late in the night or early in the morning, depending on how you look at it. But that was a phenomenal night by all accounts, and yeah, had a lot of fun. So, like I say, all the drivers in Formula E are fantastic. There are some that I know better than others, and some that I need to get to know a little bit more. But everyone there has been great, and yeah, looking forward to building those relationships in the future as well.
Yes, because I was thinking in Monaco we had stroopwafels, which are the Dutch like cookies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and we gave them to some drivers, and we gave them to Norman Nato and to Jake Dennis. And I was the one to give Norman the stroopwafels first. I was like, thank you. And then Danik, who was not savvy on this podcast anymore, she gave them to Jake. And then Norman said like, oh, he doesn't need them because he's already too chubby. And I was standing there like, is someone filming this? Because nobody is going to believe this, that it just happened. But I was also like rubbing Jake's tummy, and I was like, okay. It was funny, but at that moment, I was in shock that just happened just because
Yeah.
of the stroopwafels.
It's a good dynamic that Norman and Jake have actually between one another, and I think that's why the harmony in the team has been really good this year. There's been, obviously Norman has been more regularly at the sharp end than some of his previous teammates over the last few years, and I think that's definitely helped the dynamic. But also, I think that they just get on really, really well. So when you're able to have that level of banter and just a bit of a joke and a laugh, it's really nice. And again, this isn't the sort of thing that you get in every other paddock, so it's important to appreciate and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think this was so funny because like it was very busy, and I was like, what did you say? Because it happened, and then I was thinking like, did he just say that? Well, yeah.
Yeah, I get you.
Like, what does a race weekend look like for you?
Oh, good. That's a good question. So generally, I'll arrive. Depends on whether we're doing long haul or short haul. So if we're doing short haul, I'll arrive on the Thursday, and then sort of mooch around in the paddock in the afternoon. Friday, sorry, is generally not such a busy day from my perspective. So sort of get there, early-ish in the morning, about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock into the paddock, get some breakfast, have a little wander. It's a good opportunity for me to go and have a and kind of find out what the latest information is and that sort of thing. Swat up on my notes, just make sure that I've got everything prepared and ready. The whole idea is that we want to make sure that we're ready for free practice 1 and the show that we do at 5 o'clock when we kick that off. So we do different checks to make sure that all the commentary facilities are working, that we can hear all the different presenters. I can hear the gallery back in London as well to make sure that they're able to communicate effectively with me, that the monitors are displaying all the right things. So it's a case of just sort of prepping and getting everything ready from a preparation point of view from the drivers, and also, like I say, from an operational point of view to make sure that the commentary box is working okay. Then we go live for the show on Friday, finish that off, back to the hotel, get some dinner, straight to bed, try and get an early night, because generally Saturday, and if it's a doubleheader Sunday, they're really early starts. So I'm awake at sort of 5:30, 5:45, up for free practice 2, leaving the hotel generally at about 7 o'clock, straight in for the show at 8, which, is fine for me and fine for the other presenters as well, because they end up having a nice lie-in in bed. It's generally me and Saunders that end up being up early in the morning whilst everyone else is, chomping down on their cornflakes and we're sat there on air, sort of thing. So not that I'm bitter about it at all, but I do like having a little lie-in. Anyway, I am joking, obviously. And then we go into qualifying at about 10 o'clock, do that for a couple of hours. Qualifying is the busiest show that we do because there's so many moving parts. Obviously, you've got the duels, which make it really action-packed and busy. So there's that to consider. And then we go into, obviously, the race in the afternoon as well. So, get the race done. What I've tried to do over the last few rounds in particular is I'll make sure that I'm on the grid when the grid opens so that I can talk to the drivers there, because again, like I said earlier on, it's getting those last little tidbits of information that can make a difference to the commentary. So I'll do that, and then we go on air for the race at 3 o'clock. So I'll make sure I'm in the box, got all my notes ready, everything's all working. I'm there with whoever I'm commentating alongside, and that they're all happy. And then we go live for the race, and 45 minutes later, generally we crown a winner, and rinse and repeat for the next day, and then either fly home on the Sunday night or fly home on the Monday morning.
Sounds like a very busy weekend. I mean, I've been obviously in Monaco and in Berlin. In Monaco, I didn't do anything media related as much as I should have, but in Berlin I had more time. But I didn't realize until like Berlin, like with qualifying, that like the time between those two walls is longer than I thought it was.
Yeah. It certainly it is a bit of time, and it's one of those things that people don't generally see it if they're watching a broadcast on TV because it goes to a commercial break. But I'll still commentate on those during the break because not every broadcaster will take it at the same time. So if we have a pause after the quarterfinals, say, and there's a bit of a wait to go until the semis, or I think generally the longest wait is between the semis and the finals. There's a fair bit of a gap between them. So we'll still end up commentating on them. So in reality, you're basically commentating for 2 hours, pretty much non-stop. And Saturday and Sunday are essentially 12-hour days with, a good fair bit of talking in between that. And it might not sound like the most difficult thing in the world, but you've got to pad it out and you've got to find things to talk about. And sometimes there can be lulls and so on. So that's where you earn your money as a commentator, is being able to fill in those gaps. We had it in London last year. We went on air for the race on the Sunday and it was wet, and it was an hour and a half of just talking about nothing because nothing had happened. Obviously the championship had been decided from a driver's perspective. There was a bit of jeopardy as to were Envision going to take the team's title, was it going to be a late charge from Andretti or whoever. But we came on air and we're like, well, we're gonna have to just spin this one out a little bit here, lads, because that's what you have to do.
Yeah, I remember that like they went like to do a round with the safety car, and I was like, it's still not dry enough. And then they went in and I was like, oh, it's still not good enough. And then the second time I was like, they will go out by now because they will not stay in for this long, because otherwise it's like the day will end. But those moments I was like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes.
It's just one of those things. It's part of the job, and obviously it's okay when it's a situation that you can kind of be in control of. So that race hadn't started. It's not like you're sat there waiting for news because there's been a red flag and you're waiting for an update on a driver or a situation that's developed or something along the lines of that. You're just sort of sat there talking and having a chat, and it's kind of radio with pictures at that point. And we're lucky in Formula E that we can throw down to the Prez team as well. So I could throw down to Nicky or to Radzi or Saunders or whoever it may be, and they can kind of relieve us for a few minutes while we take a break and just sort of get our heads in order and work out where we're going to go to next, sort of thing. I've been in other situations on different commentaries before where you don't have the luxury of a presentation team to throw down to. So you start commentating at 11 o'clock in the morning, you don't finish commentating until 3, and you have a 2-minute break in between races. So, and if there's a red flag for 45 minutes, well, you're filling that red flag for 45 minutes, and that's just part of the job. So it taught me, quite early on that I had to learn how to just talk nonsense, which is why some of my answers in this podcast are going to feel like War and Peace to some people, I think. But you just sort of get used to talking a lot. And yeah, it's just part of the gig.
Sure. Talking about like goals, I always set goals for little things like this podcast, myself, that kind of stuff. Do you have any goals regarding motorsport?
That's an interesting one. In terms of commentary, not particularly, no. A lot of people say to me, would you like to go to Formula One day? And would you like to do this or would you like to do that? And don't get me wrong, if the opportunity came about, I would jump at it because these are opportunities that you don't get every day. However, I don't have aspirations to go and do Formula One, say, for example. That's not my end goal, because if I aimed for that and I didn't achieve it, I'd feel disappointed, right? All I want to be is successful in what I do. And whatever that looks like for me, it is basically being happy. That's what I want to be. I just want to be happy in what I do. And if I'm happy in where I'm at and the things I'm commentating on, and I'm able to still do this for a living and enjoy it, then that's the most wonderful thing in the world. It doesn't matter whether that's commentating on Formula E or whether it might be commentating on lawnmower racing or mini bikes or whatever it might happen to be. As long as I'm enjoying it, that's the important thing. So in terms of goals from a career perspective, not really. I just try not to set them. I just take every day as it comes and I just enjoy what it is that I do because I know that I'm in a very fortunate position to be able to do this and I want to appreciate it as much as I can because there may be a time in 5 or 10 years, maybe less than that, who knows, that I might not be able to do this anymore. And for every day that I'm able to get up and I'm able to call this my job and to enjoy it as part of my career, I'm very grateful. So that's all I really care about in that perspective. From a driving perspective, are there things that I'd like to do? Of course there are. I'd like to go and drive more powerful cars. I'd like to drive a rallycross car. I drove a Formula E car a little while back. It'd be cool to have another blast in one of those. And I just, want to enjoy driving and having a bit of fun. I'm very fortunate to be in a position where I have sort of built up my repertoire of driving and I can jump into a car. I'm not a professional racing driver by any stretch of the imagination, but I've got a good understanding of how a car works and its dynamics, and I'm just able to go and enjoy it. So I just would love to be able to go and do a bit more racing. The juxtaposition is that doing the job that I do, you don't get much time to go and do that. I've not done any racing for the start of this year. I did sort of 2 or 3 events at the end of last year, but I've essentially written off the first 6 or 7 months, wait until July is out the way with Formula E finished, and then hopefully I can look at going racing and enjoying that myself. But until then, it sort of sits on the back burner a little bit.
Understandable, because I always say, and people forget that if you work in motorsport, that you will miss a lot of things in your personal life. I think people forget that. Like, I scroll a lot through TikTok, and there are so many young girls who said, "Oh, I want to work in Formula One," and they have I think more like the glamorous idea of working in motorsport, but forget how hard work it actually is, and how many long hours and long days, and you are away every so many weeks. Like, I mean, if you people who love to do that, I definitely have respect for that. But I also think it's important for young girls to know that it's hard work. You're going to do this if you really, really, really love your job. But
Mm.
otherwise, you will get just burnt out yourself.
It does take
But
its toll because you,
yeah,
you you do miss opportunities. You're absolutely right. I've certainly missed opportunities in the past as well, family occasions. Unfortunately, funerals at points as well because you're away for work or certain. I've missed weddings or I've missed birthdays and those sorts of things. And so, I remember when I was living out in Spain, I actually I was with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and I told her that I was busy working, but instead I flew home to surprise her for a birthday because we didn't see each other all that much. But you do have to accept that there are sacrifices that you make with this job, and there are certainly sacrifices. I'm very fortunate that I live alone. I have a couple of cats, but I don't have anybody to answer to at home, so I can just sort of go away, do my own sort of thing, and as long as the cats get fed, that's me kind of done and dusted. But there are sacrifices that you have to make, and if I did end up in a relationship at some point in the future, or if I had decided that I wanted to settle down and have a family, you certainly have to think about those sorts of things. I mean, look at Crofty this year; he's getting married and he's taking a few races off to sort of focus his efforts on that, and it's part of the job, of course, being away and traveling. And it sounds very glamorous, and it is. It's wonderful. It beats stacking shelves at the supermarket, right? But you do have to accept that there are going to be things that you're going to miss out on. But it's in the name of your career, and if you enjoy your job and if it's what you do, then hopefully the trade-off is worth it.
yeah, I always think, like, I know, I've done worked in like the horse sector, because I was a very horsey girl, so I've worked for very long hours, like
Mhm.
as hard work. People also forget it, but it's the same as in motorsport. You really need to have the passion for it to, like, okay, I'm going to miss those things in my personal life, but it's worth it in the end.
Mhm.
Uh, but like with social media, a lot of young girls on social media only see like the good things about it
I
and
think that's
forget
social
the,
media in general, though. Would you not
yeah,
agree? Because we
yes,
sort of portray our lives online. I have a real sort of bee in my bonnet about this in particular at the moment. We portray our lives online to be these wonderful things, where we go and we travel around the world, or we go and experience this, or we've had a lovely day here. But there are things that we don't always enjoy in life, and there are things that, get people down, and there are things that don't necessarily get talked about, but we don't share those online because they're not happy, fun stories. And I think that that's a shame because there are lesser talked about things that we should talk about. It's not all glamour and sunshine and rainbows with this job. There are downsides to it, and there are downsides to every aspect of life. There are times over the last 9 months where I've sort of been sat there thinking, well, this is a lot, and I've been dealing with some really sort of heavy personal stuff that's been going on, and I've been trying to battle that and deal with it. But I'm very lucky to be able to go and do this job and to kind of get myself away from sort of different elements of my life and focus on these things in my career. But like you say, a lot of people look at it online and think this is the most wonderful job in the world. And don't get me wrong, from my point of view, it is. But there are going to be things that you're not always going to be able to enjoy about it, and there will be downsides. And it's all relative, isn't it? I've come away from days before I've been working, and you moan about this or you moan about that because something wasn't great. But you're into, and you feel guilty about that because you're like, oh, I'm halfway around the bloody world and I'm moaning about this. But the reality is that there are going to be things that aren't always brilliant, and it's okay to feel like that. You just have to remind yourself that it's all right to not be all right sometimes.
Yes, because also like for me I didn't know how like the media access would be because I never done it, and it was my first time in Monaco and then in Berlin. But it's also people have so many high expectations about it, and I was like, okay, I will see what happened and how it is, and people also forget. I think they always say, oh, you're like in the paddock, but you're also working. You're also still doing stuff you still need to do. And it's a lot of waiting. It's not always, for me, it wasn't always like watching. Of course, you're looking at the race, but it's not like the same as if you would be there as a fan. And it's sometimes I'm like, okay, this is what I want. From Monaco on, I was like, okay, this is really what I want, and I want to make this work. But it's for me, I think sometimes with young girls, I'm like, do you really want to do this because for the good reasons? Because you really are passionate about it and you want to talk about it, or like write about it? Or do you just want to be there because you think it's fun?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a lot of work. And I'm doing it now with the podcast, but I'm also doing a course with copywriting because I want to do this I want to take it more professionally with my platform. But people forget that like in the media center, these people are all working. It's not all fun and giggles. Like it's a serious job.
That's it.
So
Yeah, and there are things that you've got to, you've got to take it seriously with this job. If you want a job in the paddock, you have to put your all into it, and it doesn't happen overnight. Getting the Formula E job, that effectively was what 13, 14 years of my life that led up to that opportunity, from starting doing radio when I was a young kid, to getting the gig at Formula E, which is the biggest opportunity that I've ever had. But it's taken years of my life to get there, and it's taken a lot of sacrifice. When I was 15, 16, and I was doing radio and trying to learn my trade, and all my mates were going out and getting drunk or having fun or whatever. I didn't do that because I was there sort of sacrificing it. And I'm not saying it's the same for everybody because everybody's routine is going to be different. But you have to be serious about what it is that you do, and you have to be dedicated to it, and you have to accept that you are going to get knocked back sometimes or sideways or whatever it might be. And you might think that there's a great opportunity and that you're perfect for it, and that opportunity might never come off, or it might come off, but it might come off in a few years' time. And you're just like, oh, okay. But you learn from everything that you do, you learn from it. I remember when I was starting out commentating and I had an opportunity to do a rallycross championship, and I was going to get paid a pittance for it. It was not a lot of money, and essentially I worked out that I'd break even every weekend, and I thought, you know what, it's worth it for the opportunity because I'll become a better commentator at the end of it. And everything was there ready to go, and I had a meeting with them at Autosport, and suddenly they were like, yeah, we haven't got the money for it, we haven't got the budget, and the rug was pulled from under my feet, and I was like, oh, well, that's that done then, great, okay. And I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And I was very lucky that a friend of mine called Jake Sanson, who's a commentator as well, he came to me and said that there's an opportunity here with Cool Fab Racing. It's a mini bike championship. I'd like you to do it this year. You were working with another guy called Lester Forbes, and go and do this. So I went and I did that, and I'll be forever in his debt for that because he paved the way for me to go into bike racing. Without that opportunity that year, I'd never have gone and done MotoGP and World Superbikes. I'd never have traveled around the world. And when I lived in Spain and was traveling around for, working for Dorna, that made me such a better commentator without even realizing it. And I was, 19, 20, 21 years old. And I didn't even appreciate the opportunity I had at the time. I was living in Spain and thinking, God, I wish I was at home because I missed my family and I missed my, the girlfriend that I had at the time. And I missed all of these things and I was just homesick. But it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot of perseverance and it made me a better person without even realizing it. So when I came back, I was like, right, I'm ready to go and I'm ready to hit the ground running and to do this and to do that, So every opportunity, I think everything happens for a reason is probably what I would say. But yeah, just going back to your original point, sorry, I've gone on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, you've got to work hard. You've got to be prepared to put in the hours and make sacrifices. It's part of the job.
These are sometimes create your own opportunities. Like with me, I try to, like with the media accreditation, this was never the plan to get it for this year. I just wanted to know how far I would come into the process. And then suddenly I also forgot about it a little bit. And then I got an email from, oh, yeah, accepted. I was like, oh, okay. So
you never forget that first moment though, do you? When you get your first accreditation accepted. I remember the same thing, the Autosport show, and I applied for the radio station that I was volunteering for. And I remember just like jumping for joy because it was amazing. And it's a sign that you're like, yeah, okay, I'm doing this and it's working. And it's wonderful to have that encouragement just to give you that bit of extra belief in yourself, So well done.
Yes, I agree because all experience like this, I always say, like, it's hard to get experience if you only want to have the big jobs, the good jobs. You just need to start somewhere. And for me, like with the podcast, I was like, I like to do this. I like talking with people. And I remember a conversation with Nick Golding in Monaco. He was like, "Oh, how is the podcast doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's going. Like we have good episodes, bad episodes. I like the conversation with people I have, which brings me to opportunities I might not had if I didn't talk to those people. So, like, and he also said like, podcast is hard. It's if you like it, just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's like a TikTok trend in F1 TikTok. It's like with the sounds from Laura Winter. I was like, so everybody in girls and women in motorsport, just keep going. You will get there at some point.
Mm.
You need to just try to do stuff and do new things, other things, and at some point you will get where you want to be. I feel like. I mean, I felt this year, so yeah.
It's just about perseverance, and like I said, you might get knocked back or sideways or whatever direction it might happen to be in, but the next opportunity will be there, and you've just got to be ready for it. And like you say, starting out small and building up. You can't expect to want to become a journalist and suddenly end up in Formula One or whatever it might happen to be. You've got to build yourself up to that. So, and when you get there, you'll be ready for it. That's the thing.
Yeah. So we always ask, and this is something I will keep continuing with people, is what is the best advice you have gotten and what is the best advice you have given? So what advice would you give your younger self?
What advice? Oh, okay, right. That's a really interesting question, actually. Best advice that I've gotten, you're only as good as your last gig, is a classic one. And it's true, you are. If you've done a terrible job, well, you might be losing your job for the next time around, and you've got to be on your A game at every opportunity. You've got to be there and you've got to be ready. That means that any distractions in your personal life, you need to put them to one side. So I've always been quite good at being able to compartmentalize things that have been going on personally for me, perhaps, and just focusing on the job in hand because it's just part of it. And forgive my language here, but I was told when I was, I think about 19, I was working in a bike racing paddock, and there was a parent of a racer, and we were just chatting about the job, and I was saying about the different opportunities, and discussing about where I wanted to go. And she said, one thing I will say is don't shit on people on the way up, because they'll shit on you twice as hard on the way down. And it's a very good point that she made, and that's always stuck with me. That is, always be kind to people, and always try to be the person that you would to be treated how you wish to be treated, is what I'm trying to say there. So I always try and be kind to people. If there's an opportunity and I can help somebody out, I'll try and help them out, because I just think it's one, it's good karma, and two, I want to help people out. I want to see people succeed, and there'll be people that will come and do my job in the future if Formula E is, still going in 40 years' time. Hopefully, I've got long enough left in the tank. There will be people that will go on to do other jobs. I remember when I started out and I was 18 commentating, I was the young guy. I was coming in, I was trying to nip at the heels of the experienced blokes. And I can imagine they probably found it a bit frustrating. At the same time, there are now people that are that age that are doing that for me and my job and asking me for advice. And that feels like a whole weird concept. So, I always try and be kind. I always try and, help people out. There was a gentleman when I was in China who was a journalist who was accredited there. And he said, it'll be really nice to be able to meet you and, have a chat about what it is that you do. So I had a chat with him, and I showed him around the commentary box, and, hopefully it helped him out a little bit. It's just one of those things that I just try to, like I say, be the person that I would want to be. And in terms of advice that I would give my younger self, I'd say just be patient, just be calm, because opportunities aren't going to land in your lap all the time. And you've just got to be there and be ready for it when it happens, and just enjoy it more. Because as I said to you earlier on, when I lived in Spain, I didn't enjoy that time in my life. At the time, I look back now and I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity. But like I say, when I was, in my early 20s, I was just a fish out of water, and I thought I knew the world, and I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing at all. It was my first time living away from home. I was really homesick, and as such, I kind of resented it where I was, and I didn't appreciate it fully. So I would say to myself, just enjoy what you've got, because you don't know when it's going to be gone. And I try and apply that aspect to every element of my life, So I still always tell my parents I love them. I'm 27, for crying out loud, but it doesn't matter, because I could end up, getting on a plane, and that could be the last time I see them for whatever reason. So I just think it's important to appreciate what it is that you've got and what it is that you have around you, and to just enjoy every opportunity as much as you can.
Just talking about like early 20s, I remembered I was studying tourism in Maastricht, and I was always there. I think I was 22 at the time, and my classmates were like 17, 18 years old. And at some point, they said something. I said to them, you think back to this moment a couple of years later, and you will tell yourself, oh, she was right. Because you think you know everything
Mm.
now. But if I look back when I was 16, and I'm turning 27 in August, so that's almost a year. I'm like, I didn't know anything back then. I thought I knew everything, but you don't know anything if you like look back at it. So
Yeah. It's
I
so
always think
true.
that's funny.
It's so true. Like I said, I thought I knew the world when I moved out to Spain, and I didn't think it at the time, if that makes sense. I just sort of was almost acting like I'd kind of made it. And I don't want to say an arrogance about me, but I certainly had a belief in myself that this was my big opportunity. And I was like, yeah, great, I'm here for a reason. But I didn't appreciate that opportunity as much. And I didn't put as much effort into certain things as I should have done, which I've really learned from. I look back now to even 4 years ago when I was 23. And I thought, again, at 23, I'm an adult. I've been living back in the UK for a couple of years. I've got some good opportunities on the table. Things are going all right. And I look back now, I'm 27. I'm like, I knew nothing. I literally knew nothing. And you're always learning. You're always adapting. I never come off air from commentary thinking that was the best I could have ever done it. There's always something that needs improving. Doesn't matter what it is. And the second you do come off air and you think I couldn't do that any better, you're in the wrong job. You're being complacent. And if you're being complacent, then you need to be looking elsewhere, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not saying you shouldn't give yourself praise, because you certainly should give yourself praise. You should certainly pat yourself on the back if you think you've done a good job, but there's always something that could be better. But it's that constant strive for improvement, that constant strive for perfection that I think a lot of people chase. We all chase, don't we, to a certain degree? Racing drivers chase it. They always want the perfect lap. The perfect lap has never existed and never will exist. They're always chasing an extra half a tenth of a second or a thousandth of a second, with pole position in Shanghai, for example. There's always something that can be better.
Yes, I agree. But also, like, for me, and I remembered Saunders saying that as well. I'm a perfectionist and an overthinker. Those two doesn't work well. And if I look back at like the episode I recorded for Saunders last week, I was like, and now I'm thinking, oh, that could I could have done this better and that better and that better. But you learn from those moments, but you also shouldn't like I overthink those moments. I'm like, okay, I can do that better at some point. It's like you will get better at it by doing more of it.
Yeah, it's not important not to put pressure on yourself. It's a natural part of development. I listened back to some commentary the other day when I was 21 and doing World Superbikes. I was 21. I knew nothing about the world and about life at that time. I had no life experience, but I thought I did. And I listened back to the commentary and I thought, God, this is terrible. But at the time, I thought it was the dog's danglies, because it was the best I could do. I listened back to some commentary from a couple of years ago, and I hate listening back to myself, but it's part of the job. You kind of have to do it. But it makes you appreciate like where you've come from and what you've done. So I completely get what you mean. I know what will happen is I'll listen back to this podcast and I'll be like, oh, I should have said this, or maybe I could have said this here, or maybe I could have done that, because I'm constantly trying to strive for improvement. But it's part of it, isn't it? And it's part of why we do what we do is chasing that and wanting to be better.
Yes, I totally agree. Everybody has normally someone they look up to. Is there someone you look up to, and if so, who is it and why?
Well, everyone's going to say Murray Walker if they're a lead commentator on motorsports, aren't they? Because, of course, he was the voice of Formula One. Now, I'm going to throw a curveball in there. I think Murray Walker was one of the best commentators in the business because his enthusiasm, his infection, the way he was able to articulate a race to the audience was phenomenal. However, he wasn't the voice of Formula One that I grew up with. James Allen was the voice of Formula One that I grew up with, who commentated on ITV, replaced Murray Walker, had a thankless job to jump into his shoes, and was phenomenal, was an incredible journalist, an incredible storyteller. And I was watching back actually the 2005 Japanese Grand Prix qualifying yesterday, which is a bit of a geeky thing to watch, I know, but I really like single lap qualifying, which is why I love the duels so much, just as an FYI. I think it's a fantastic format. But also I watch it as well because I think there's things that I can learn from it. I like watching it from an entertainment perspective, but also I'm listening to the commentary and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I could diverge here, or maybe I could look at doing this or doing that. That's a race from 20 years ago from a commentary, from a qualifying session that probably doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. It doesn't really have any bearing on anything, but it's just things that you can learn. But I love the way that James Allen was able to articulate with the audience. And he hasn't done lead F1 commentary since, I think, 2015 when he was doing some 5 Live stuff. And before that on TV since 2008. And, I thought he was phenomenal. And I really looked up to him as a kid. And I always wanted to be able to emulate what it is that he does. So he was the guy for me personally that I looked at and I thought, I want to be a motorsports commentator because of you. Unfortunately, I've never actually met him. So, if I ever meet him one day, I'll be sure to tell him in person. But I hope that opportunity does come because, like I say, he was one of the main reasons that I ended up becoming a motorsports commentator.
It's always hard to step in someone's other shoes because, also at some point, Crofty will stop doing this. And I'm like, I think it was Benjamin? Harry Benjamin.
Harry Benjamin, yeah. I've known Harry for years. Really, really lovely bloke and a phenomenal commentator as well. Lucky bugger. But, opportunities like that don't come about very often in Formula One. And to be fair to him, he's honed his craft on 5 Live over the last couple of years. He's done a lot of F1 TV stuff on Formula 2 and Formula 3. And he's very, very good at what he does, and did a phenomenal job for Sky Sports as well. So, yeah, more credit to him because he really deserves that opportunity. And like you say, who knows? When Crofty does decide to hang up his headphones, maybe that opportunity will be there for Harry, or maybe it'll be there for somebody else. That's the beauty of the job. Whenever that may be, there might be somebody else waiting in the wings,
Yes, and I was also, because I believe there were a lot of like hate around it. Like, why is Crofty there? Like, I don't think he will do this forever, people. Like in the Netherlands, we have had Olaf Mol, who
Yep.
did Formula One, and he's really good in this. But now with Viaplay, we have other commentators, and people are not happy with those people. But I always think like it's also not fair to them. Like they didn't even have an opportunity to like commentate F1 until Sego didn't get the rights of F1. But you only get better at it if you get an opportunity and make use of that opportunity. So it's always hard to fill other people's shoes who are like this great things.
There's no
I feel
replacement for
like.
experience, in my opinion. And it's one of those things, as I said at the start of this, commentary is so subjective. People that will be familiar with a certain voice or a certain person may not like another person. And that's just part of the gig, unfortunately, whether you like it or you don't like it. The unfortunate thing is that in the day and age that we live in, people can have an opinion and do project that opinion quite regularly online via Twitter or Facebook or whatever, YouTube comments or whatever it might happen to be, and a lot of the time anonymously. They don't have a face to the name. And 9 out of 10 people wouldn't go and say those things to your faces and don't necessarily realize the impact that certain words can have on you. So you do have to brush it off with criticism. Obviously I jumped into, Jack's shoes kind of at the end of last year. And there was a bit of criticism online about it because I'm not Jack, and Jack was a phenomenal commentator and did an amazing job for Formula E for nearly 10 years. And it's one of those that people aren't going to like change. And some people didn't like the change. Some people did like the change. It's part of it. And the more you do it, the more it gets accepted, hopefully. And you can't please all the people. So you've just got to go there, do your best, the best that you can. And ultimately, if the people that pay you are happy, that's all that really matters at the end of the day, rather than some anonymous person online. So, go there, enjoy it. And as long as your employers are happy, happy days.
Yeah, I feel with social media these days, like I always tell myself, if you don't tell the person like in the face, don't say it online. Like some stuff, I'm like, do you really walk up to like a Logan or Esteban and tell them
Mm.
that in their face? I don't think so, because you will like, I don't think you will do that. I don't think people have like the confidence to do so. So don't put this online. And with people accounts with no face, I'm like, really, at least have the balls to do it with your face.
It's
But
generally people that don't have a lot of um purpose going on and they're trying to make themselves feel better. It goes back to being bullied at school or something like that, isn't it? It's generally people that are lacking in confidence, trying to make themselves feel better by making others feel inferior. And it's a real shame that it happens. And it's a shame that you can't really regulate it to a point. You can block people, but it doesn't stop those words being said in the first place, does it? And it's just part of it. You just have to accept it, and I'm grateful that I'm not Esteban Ocon or Logan Sargent or whoever, because some of the stuff that you see online with that, you just think like, what is going on? Why are you spending your time doing this? But for some people, it makes them feel better, or they feel they have a right to project that opinion on other people. Of course, you have a right to have an opinion. Whether you project that or not, and whether you decide to do something with it is a complete other matter. And it's such a shame. And it is one of the downfalls of social media in the modern day and age that people can do that. Back in the day with commentary, just to lead on that as an example, if people didn't like something that Murray Walker had said, you'd have to write in to ITV or to Ofcom or whatever, get a pen and paper out, go to the post office, get a stamp, get some envelopes, stick it in the post box, and then maybe you might get a letter read. Nowadays, you can jump onto your laptop and within 10 seconds, you can be projecting your opinion and be trolling people online. And it's such a shame that that's the way that we live nowadays. But it's the modern world, and you have to be there. You have to be on
yes,
social media. So
it's like two things. It's great because you can connect with people all over the world, like I did with you. But also like the fact that like an Ocon needs to make a post about it,
mm,
that Latifi did need to make a post about it. Like I think that goes so far that they feel they need to do the need to do that, like it shouldn't be needed. And even then, with Ocon's post this week of last week, people still like, or yeah, but Lens gets more hate. Like it's not a like a game from who gets more hate. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really unfortunate, and like I say, it's just one of those things with social media. Unfortunately, you're not, like I say, going to be able to please all the people all the time, and it's just one of those things. It's not warranted, it's not justified, and it is quite cowardly. But it is what it is. Unless you're not going to be on any social media at all and not expose yourself to that, you have to accept that you are going to occasionally get that, and it just is what it is. Sad though it
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah. Then something I start to ask people as well is, do you have tips for people who want to do what you are doing?
Yeah, I think I've kind of gone through most of them already, to be honest with you. As I said, this industry is about who you know. If you want to be a motorsports commentator, I don't know if I'm the best person to give advice because I'm still very much learning and don't necessarily feel like I belong where I belong sometimes. But it is an industry of who you know. So build up the network of contacts, get experience by any means possible. By that, I don't mean stealing gigs from other people, by the way. That's a bad thing to do. What I mean by that is, find an old Formula One video, find an esports championship that you can go and commentate on. We're in a very fortunate day and age where you can do things remotely, you can do things online. And if you want to take it seriously, invest in yourself, invest in good equipment, invest in good audio quality, microphones and interfaces and stuff like that, and make sure that you've got the facilities in order to be able to do your job properly. If you're doing it with a 1099 headset from Argos, well, it's going to sound crap and it's going to make you sound crap. So try and invest in yourself if you're able to do that. If you have the ability to buy a decent headset and a decent microphone and a decent interface or whatever it might happen to be, so that you're able to do the job to the best of your ability, and meet people, network. That is the most important thing. This industry, as I said, is who you know. And none of my gigs have ever come from the education that I've had. I never went to university. I never did anything like that. I just decided to go out and work and meet people. And that's not the same for everybody. I'm not saying don't go to university. Of course, go to university if you want to go that and you want to go and study journalism or study something within motoring or whatever it might happen to be, or something completely different. If you want to be an astrophysicist on the side, go and do that. But if you want to, be a motorsports commentator, go out there, meet people, and try and be the person whose phone is going to ring when there's going to be an opportunity, because that's what you want.
Yes. We also have follow-up questions. I have three.
Okay.
And the first one is, what was your most memorable race you got to commentate on and the best moment?
That's a really interesting question because I've got a terrible memory for things like that. And I'm trying to think about the best race I've ever commentated on. Sao Paulo this year was pretty high up there from a commentary point of view. I really enjoyed that, with seeing Sam and Mitch last lap, last corner, basically going down to the wire. That was phenomenal. Also, I'd spent 2 days in my hotel room being quite ill, and my throat had dried out due to the aircon. So that's why my voice was cracking, because, when I went, oh, like that, I sounded like the dog could hear my commentary. That was why. Because my voice was naturally going. But I really enjoyed that from an entertainment perspective, because I genuinely didn't think Sam was going to be able to pull that off. It was a win it or bin it scenario, and you saw his car getting out of shape as he went to the outside, and it was a ballsy move, and fair play to him for pulling it off, and fair play to Mitch as well for not sending both of them off into the barrier, because that could have quite easily handed the win to, well, Roland got third in the end, didn't he, on the line with Jake. So could have quite easily handed that over to him. Other races that I've commentated on that have been particularly memorable, we had a race in Sydney for Gran Turismo back in 2020, just before the pandemic kicked off. We flew out there and they were just about doing the temperature checks at Singapore airport when we connected over, but it wasn't on lockdown. There was no sort of indication that COVID was going to become the monster that it became. And we had a race there in the grand final in the Nations Cup, and it was between two drivers, and it was the closest ever finish that we've seen in a race. And I, I made a bit of a faux pas, actually. I commentate with a chap called Jimmy Broadbent, who those of you who know sim racing or who watch YouTube may have heard of him. He is a very successful sim racer and now a very good real world racing driver as well. Actually just got back from the Nürburgring 24 hours, which I suppose turned into the Nürburgring 8 hours because of the fog that happened over that weekend. But anyway, I was commentating with him, and I threw to him in anticipation of him coming back to me. But the problem is the race, it was the last lap, and I threw to him waiting for a throwback. And I kind of did it at the wrong point. I was like, oh, that was a bit too late. And then he just kind of carried on because it was so exciting what was happening. And he called them over the line with the closest ever finish that we've seen in Gran Turismo. And that was a really sort of memorable race. And it was like, oh, great, this is going to be a brilliant year. We're really excited for this. And then, of course, the pandemic really kicked on and we didn't see each other for 2 years. So it was one of those. But those are the two that kind of stick out in my head at the moment. If anything else comes to mind during the remainder of this, I'll let you know. But yeah, there's been some very good races that I've had the ability to commentate on. I'm looking forward to hopefully a championship showdown battle going into London. That's what I'd really like. I'd like to see that going down to the checkered flag.
I mean, I hope it goes to London because I will be there. So I hope it goes to London and it's not already decided in Portland. Although maybe it's nice for the people in Portland, but for me, I would love to have it in London. So
I think it's likely it will go down to London, given the unpredictability that we've seen in Formula E. All it takes is one bad weekend for Cassidy, for example, and then suddenly he's on the back foot. He's got the momentum with him at the moment with a couple of strong finishes in Shanghai. To an extent, Jake is kind of now out of the title fight, even by his own admission. He's going to have a phenomenally good final four races and hope that everyone else has a bit of a stinker. But also Roland and Wehrlein are very much in contention. Will be nipping at Cassidy's heels. So I don't think it's out of the question at all this weekend.
Yeah, at least I'm happy it's always so close, like last year with Jake. And now I was like, it's funny because Sons asked like, oh, who do you think is going to win? I'm like, if it's going how it's going right now, I think Nick is going to get it, but it's Formula E, so you never know.
No,
That's
absolutely
all
not.
you know.
Absolutely not. He was my pick at the start of the year, Nick, to be honest with you, just because I saw how frustrated he was at the end of last season. And I don't know him particularly that well as a person, but I know his racecraft as a driver, and he's phenomenal. And he's got that mental resilience within him to be able to bounce back from the disappointment of that, because nobody wants to be able to finish second, do they? So let's wait and see. I think it'll be a very telling weekend in Portland. We had a very telling weekend in Shanghai, actually. Momentum looking like it's going more the way of Jaguar, not through Wehrlein's fault, of course. That incident he had with Sam Bird in the second race really costing him. So who knows? Anything could happen. But yeah, I think the momentum is with Jaguar for the time being.
Yes, I agree. Then I think it's funny. I had the story up 2 times, and this person asks the same question 2 times.
Okay.
How does it feel to commentating on a championship as big as Formula E?
It's amazing. It's everything I've ever wanted from a commentary standpoint. And as I said earlier on, it is the biggest opportunity that I've ever had in terms of motorsport commentary. So I'm very, very fortunate to be able to do that. It's something that I never thought would come about, really. That phone call that I just sort of got midway through last year. Yeah, okay, great. This might lead to something. And you have to just treat it as like it's a one-time gig, and I'll go there and I'll do the job to the best of my ability. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. It's one of those. But I'm forever grateful to Formula E because they took a risk, getting me on board, because I was still relatively unknown in the commentary sphere. I've done things like MotoGP and World Superbikes, and I've done Gran Turismo for the last few years. However, I've never had like a big single-seater car gig in terms of doing F3 or F2 or F1 or anything like that. So it was a bit of a risk, and it was a bit of a change for me as well, because it's a fair old time since I last commentated on a real world car race before I got into Rome last year. Obviously, doing the virtual stuff with Gran Turismo has definitely helped with that, and I've done some rallycross stuff, I suppose, in between that. But in terms of a single-seater series like Formula E, I was very, very fortunate to be able to get the opportunity, and it is amazing and continues to be amazing. It's a wonderful job, and I hope that I'm able to continue doing it for many years to come.
And then the last question from our followers is, why did you choose to not carry on the Enrico Green for the start of the race?
That's a good question as well. I think I didn't want people to get the impression that I was just jumping into Jack's shoes and I'm trying to emulate him. Every commentator has got a trademark line, shall we say, for Lights Out. I generally have tried to avoid that because I sort of don't really think it's that important. Like, I guess it is if you want to have a catchphrase, and fair enough. I get that Crofty and Harry and stuff, they have their catchphrases, and that works for them. And maybe in time I'll find one, but I've just sort of never really found one that suited me. And I didn't want to sort of jump back onto the same one with Jack. I did put a lot of thought into it actually at the start of the year, about where I was going to go and whether I was going to use the same line or whether I was going to use a different line or whether I was going to find one. I just thought, oh, do you know what? Sod it. I'm just going to do what comes naturally to me. And if that happens to be the same line over and over again, then fine. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. I've tried to do like a bit of alliteration. So, what did I say? I said it's time for a scorcher in Shanghai. And then the next one was it's time for, oh, what was it? Who's going to be first in the Far East was the next line. I'll try and get a bit of alliteration in, and then I'll go, 5 red lights are on, lights are out. Just because that's what I've done and that's what I'm comfortable with. It's not a case of not wanting to continue the trend. And I know a lot of people did like the And We Go Green, but at the same time, I wanted to put my own trademark on it and I wanted to do commentary my way. And that's the reason why.
Yeah, I think it's funny because Harry was asked kind of the same question about Lights Out, and it was like, I think I would get sued if I did that, which was it was like, you might be right. I don't know how F1 works with that.
No, it's never worth taking the risk on things like that. Like I say, everyone's got their own idiosyncrasies, those phrases they go back to, or their trademark Lights Out line. And fair play to people for to different commentators for that, because I completely respect that. But for me, it's just it's how I do it, and that's just what it is. Really, nothing more exciting than that, I'm afraid.
Okay, so this was the last questions, but I'll always ask people, do you have questions for me?
Yeah, I do actually. So what was it that inspired you to start doing this podcast and getting into this line of work?
First was like, I want to work in motorsport and the media, and I was like, if I create something I can do on my own and don't need to have someone else to give me that opportunity, then I can still build like a portfolio and like that. And also I like to talk with different people in different parts of motorsport. So we had like content creators already. We have Tony, for example, F1 Tony. She's fantastic. It's fantastic. I really love her. And also, it's a little bit of networking, which I say it's so important. And like I also like with Jeff, I think that opportunity when that came, it was we were both very nervous, but also it was a very nice conversation and gave me the opportunity to also meet him in Monaco. I was on the grid in Monaco. Like those little things always help you. And I like social media. So that's also part why I started to do this.
That's amazing. I mean, fair play and keep it up because, as I said earlier on, the opportunity will land when you least expect it, and you've just got to be there waiting for the right thing. But it sounds like you're going the right way about it. You're enjoying what you do. You've got a passion for what you do. And ultimately, that passion, it always comes through in the end, one way or another. So fair play to you. And thank you also for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, with the question with the advice, I would always say you can learn so much from it, but also you can learn something about the person, because every person gives a different answer. And I remember like Nick Cassidy doing a live, and you could send in questions for, I think that was Da Costa, and I sent him this question, and he asked that question, and he was like, that's a stupid question. I was like, no, I know I can just make up a lot from you as a person just by answering that question, because you can see what kind of person it is and also see how their like career went. So I don't think it's stupid.
No, no, I don't. You know, there are always some questions that are, shall we say, more interesting than others. But yeah, I don't think there's anything such as a stupid question. You know, you've just got to roll with the punches, so to speak, haven't you? And you know,
Yeah.
it's also good because one thing I like about Formula E, especially, is that you do get drivers' personalities coming through. Like, you know, you've got Antonio, you've got Nick. They're two very polarizing characters just in how they operate. But I like that, you know, because you've got two drivers that approach things in a very different way, but ultimately share the same goal, and that's wonderful.
Yes. I mean, I remember from Berlin, I talked to Sanders about it as well. It's like uh, Nick won the first race in Berlin, and then he was like, he. I felt that he wasn't really happy with the win because
Mm,
it was, for him the best race because it was not straightforward. Um, but also, it's funny to see a different side because for me, I only see him as like the driver and not like from a media's perspective.
mhm.
Like Sander said he's not that open, but by it's a different Nick with fans than like with journalists, which is of course very logical because you will not say everything to a fan and
Mm.
you will say more to a journalist. Uh, but that was really nice to say. And also on the second day, Da Costa won and Sam Smith was of course wasn't there at the on the Saturday because the clash with the
Oh, the
World
World
Endurance
Endurance
Championship.
Championships. Yeah.
And I remember that he was like, the coach was like, "Hey Sam," and I was like, "What is he going to say? What is this man going to do?" And it was a funny moment, but those things you don't see as a fan, which I appreciated them more now, of course. But it was so funny, like those little moments.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to appreciate those moments for sure. And it's one of those, isn't it, where you will get certain drivers that are perhaps a little bit more candid than others in different scenarios. But you know, ultimately, you've got to be a little bit careful when there's a camera or a microphone around, especially in the modern day as well, because everyone's got a camera in their pocket, haven't they, with a smartphone? So you never know what might be being said. You've just got to be a little bit careful with things like that. Hey.
Yes, that's true. Sometimes if I see like so I saw TikTok today who someone who just arrived in Monaco was walking and she was just filming and she didn't even realize like that George Russell was running next to her.
Mm.
Like those little things. It's always like, oh yeah, you can do everything in public. You need to think about
Yeah.
it.
It's funny though. Do you ever think to yourself, well, I certainly do. You ever wonder how many like random photos that you're in the background of
Oh
sometimes? And people
yes.
people taking photos or videos, and you're like, I wonder like if you'll ever like you see someone post a photo in 20 years' time. Oh, that's me in the background of that. Would you believe it? You know?
Yeah, I had that moment on Sunday in Berlin. Mahendra was filming something, but I was
Mm.
like, oh, I don't think it's far enough in the background so you don't see me. But then they posted it on Twitter. I was like, oh, you don't see me. And then I stopped at the beginning
Hmm.
and you saw me. But I was wearing like a bluish blazer. So I was like, I could see it was me, but if you don't know me, you wouldn't see that. But I was like,
Sure.
oh. I was in shock. I didn't think I was, but that was so funny. I was like, oh, okay. But this was like for the first 2 seconds, so
Yeah, yeah.
you don't really see me only if you you
Only if
push
you're
pause.
looking for
You
you. Yeah.
yeah, and that is always funny. But also, I don't like to be in people's picture if I don't know there is the picture taking, because if I relax my face, I have like a resting bitch face, so I don't look happy.
Don't we
And
all? Don't worry about it.
yeah, but the thing is, last year I was in Monaco and we had the autograph session, and Tanique had the flag from Robin. She wanted to get signed, and she looked so so happy in that picture. And then you see me in the background, like looking mad, and I wasn't mad. That was the thing. Like I was just thinking. I don't know. It's just I saw that picture. I was like, I love she looked happy in that, but I look terrible.
Yeah, there's a few candid shots, especially with photographers lurking about in the paddock where I've ended up, and I'm like, oh, that's not a good look, that one. Try and try and look a bit happier when you're walking around, Tom.
Yeah, that's what I remind myself. I was like, just act as if you are really happy,
Yeah,
even
try and
if you're
smile.
not that happy. Or I remember with the media launch, I was like, I saw it like back after that.
Hmm.
The same night, I was like in a videos from the FIA. They were interviewing, I believe it was John Erfanye. I was like, oh, that's me. But yeah, those moments are so funny. I really
Yeah,
love those moments.
for sure.
I want to thank you for being here. It was very lovely to speak to you. And for my listeners, if you don't follow us already on the socials, in the description of today's episode, you will find the link with all of our socials and the WhatsApp group for the European races, which is only one to go. And I want to thank you for listening, and I will see you next week with another amazing guests.
Stay in fact, you want me to take you back,